Fangirl and Zack judges your favorite comic or judge your favorite comics.
One of these days we will get that title right.
I mean, you know what? I'm trying to go for a theme here that I never get the title right and you always get it right and you always tell me that one of these days for a guy I'm gonna get it right.
That's our opening. That's
we're trying to get our theme together. I realized the other day I got the grammar wrong because I said Fangirl and Zack judges your favorite, and I'm like, oh, my English teacher is like spinning in her grave somewhere, and Peter's like will be judging me because he's really into grammars and stuff. And look at it, Peter's already. So as you can see, to anyone who's new to us, welcome to our show, where we kind of mercilessly judge comics because we thought that we have all the rights to do that. And if you're not new, if you have seen our previous shows, it's like typically it's Zack and I, but this time around we have joined by Peter from Crushing Krisis. Yay!
Hey!
How are you doing, Peter?
I am so excited to be here with two of my absolute favorite internet comic book people and to be on the Fangirlz channel. And things are lovely. And it's a beautiful, clear winter day in New Zealand right now. So I'm very happy to be chatting and happy to be where I am.
Right. So if you are a comic book fan, but you have been living under a rock, you probably don't know who Peter is. But if you are any sort of form involved in collected edition community, Peter runs the best, most comprehensive website to know all your collected edition needs, Crushing Krisis. I know you paid me before this to say all of this.
No money has ever changed hands between Fangirl and I. It's never happened.
Right. But did I get it right? That's what it is, right?
It is. Yeah, and it started out with, it was in 2010. I was just talking to somebody about this today. It was in 2010. I was moving into my first house that we had bought, my partner and I was like, look, it's about time. I just want a shelf of Uncanny X-Men. How hard could it be? I just want to send Marvel a check and have them send me a box that has Uncanny X-Men 1 to, at the time we were at like 523, right? And it turned out that it was not that easy. And nobody had sat down and worked out the reading order. Nobody had sat down and just made a list of what collections and what formats did it. So I just started with Uncanny X-Men. And over the years, people have used it and given me great suggestions and feedback. It wound up encompassing all of X-Men and all of the Marvel universe. And now it even has a big chunk of DC in it too. And the mission statement is just like, it should be easy to collect the comics that have the stories that you want to read. And so that's why I keep doing it.
You are doing Lord's work, by the way. And I was so happy when there was an occasion when I could correct you on your Punisher. I'm like, Peter, this is not right. Peter, I need to tell you something. That's not right.
Because it almost never happens. Like that's like, it's not, I swear, I'm not even exaggerating if I say that almost nightly I have reason to consult it to figure out like what collections I need to go to find certain issues that I'm going to read. It is absolutely the best resource for that.
Oh my God. And the thing is, like, a number of times I went to a comic book store and I'm like, scrolling through Crushing Krisis because, I'm like, do I have this volume? I'm telling you, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing with your life? And you should go check that out. And the link will be below. It's below. I mean, is below. It's not there right now, but it will be below. So you can find out directly where to go. And yeah, so obviously between this little talk we have, like you have known that Peter is an X-Men expert, like expert, with the, you got to get the pun in. So he's like expert of X-Men. And Zack very politely said that he's an X-Men aficionado. And I am an X-Men noob. I'm an X-noob,
I've been waiting for Fangirl to pay attention to X-Men. I've sat through her Captain America obsession. I got her into Hickman only to watch that spiral into directions I was not prepared to follow all the way down the rabbit hole. And I've been waiting for this moment.
But little did you know that in getting her into Hickman, you were playing the long game because that is what it took.
That's right. Much in the way of Hickman, I laid those plot threads at the beginning of my first video, and I just waited. I waited for the plot to blossom and make sense later.
Yeah. So last year, Peter got me. He was like, "Well, Infinity War's coming, and you're gonna read this Avengers, and the Avengers it's going to be Hickman Avengers. I'm like, okay, do I have to? Fine, I'll read this. I read that first issue. Yeah, come on, read this. I read that first issue. Then I'm like, I literally have like an anime moment or like, duh, like, you know, with my eyes going, like, you know, with the eyes going like with the heart size and everything. And I'm doing like,
there's Priya with the hearts coming out of her eyes in one of our videos.
I'm going to link that video as well down below so you can follow that rabbit hole. But the thing is, like, I went down to this like Hickman thing where I was obsessed with him. I still am obsessed with his writing. I read everything that is out there except for East of West. I have read everything that Hickman. Yeah, Hickman ever wrote. I read it and I am obsessed with it. So when this was announced that X-Men is being, I'm like, oh, X-Men is cool now, you guys. I gotta read X-Men. X-Men. And then these two were like, what? Like, X-Men was always cool. I'm like, no, shut up. It's cool now. It wasn't cool all this time. So with that, we're going to talk about House of X, which is kind of something different that we're doing because typically we talk about runs that are completed or, you know, like past run. We like this is the first ever time I read a comic book on the day of release. Guys, this is huge news. I don't think you were showing enough enthusiasm for this.
This is actually where
go for it.
This is actually where I want to start. So, what in comics, if we added a concept or a writer to a franchise, could anything even be bigger than this? And I think the only thing that could be bigger just happened last year, which is to take Bendis and add him to DC and say, like, Bendis is going to write Superman, Bendis is going to touch Batman. I don't know that there's any other comic creator combined with any other franchise that can create this bomb blast level of frenetic excitement, including X-Noobs. I don't know. Is there anything else that could do this right now for either of you on any franchise?
I don't think that there's any other writer in comics right now who exists at the level that Jonathan Hickman does. I think he is the one writer who can sort of descend from his perch in indie comics and go to a big two company. And that is a big deal just by virtue of his being there. I'm not sure who else could pull that off.
Right. He got me to read a comic book because I do not read single issue unless the run is completed because it gives me a little bit of heartache. I can't do that. And it's not good for my body. But this one...
I don't think it's good for mine either, but I keep doing it.
I know. You are doing Lord's work. I'm telling you. Like, you know, you do this. And Zach does it to a degree as well. But I'm like, no, I'm not going to be doing this. But yesterday, I'm like, no, never mind. I went to Comixology, bought that digital book. I'm like, I'm still not buying floppy. I'm not descending that level.
Let's not go. Let's not go.
Yeah, let's not go.
Maintain some semblance of sanity here.
Yeah, some semblance. But I don't know. Maybe when by the time X-Men 1 comes around, it's all going to change. But anyway.
Yeah, so thinking about it, I think it's like Bendis, which we just saw. Hickman, I think if Brubaker or Rucka like signed on that they would actually do a whole franchise, that they weren't going to do their little hit and runs, but were like you know, I think Rucka with Wonder Woman was about this big, but it was just Wonder Woman. It wasn't like the whole franchise of like all of DC. I think Brubaker and Rucka are two of the only other ones that could create this level of insanity. And Ellis, but everybody knows that Ellis isn't going to stick around.
Right.
But
Ellis can't fool anybody.
That's the level of rarefied air that I think we're in when we're talking about Hickman descending, like Zach said, into a franchise.
But it's also like it's a real confluence of factors here because everybody knows that this is coming along with Disney regaining the film rights to the X-Men.
Yeah, you can't
so everybody was expecting the X-Men to finally once again become a really big deal for Marvel. And for that to coincide with Marvel getting the biggest possible get to put on that book, that's just, I mean, they are going out of their way to just send this gigantic flashing searchlight into the sky that all eyes should be directed over here right now.
Right. So with that, like, you know, with our enthusiasm kind of like there now, who wants to go for, like, Zach, how about you start us off with what did you think about it? Like, what was your overall thought? First issue.
Okay. Issue number 1, overall thought. I think that we are looking at an extremely solid B to B plus comic. And that is not the That's not the dramatic word that I think most people are going to drop in as a review of this book. But I think all things considered, it's what I would take away from this one issue. And there are a lot of footnotes that I think have to go along with that. The first being that one thing that we absolutely know about Jonathan Hickman is that you don't know where he's going with the first issue. If he looks like he's going to zig, he is 100% going to zag. So whatever this issue looks like, I don't think that's what we're actually going to be looking at by the time this series is done. I think that we also need to remember the fact that even this immediate stage of Hickman's run is going to be a two-parter between Powers of 10 and House of X, and so far we've only read half of that. All of that said, I think that he's introduced a lot of really big, interesting ideas that he can explore. I don't know that those ideas are as revolutionary as he maybe wants them to seem, or as we've been told they are. And I'm not sure that those ideas emerge naturally from the characters who are in the book. But there's a lot of meat to chew on, and I think it's enough that I stayed interested reading it. So that's my overall takeaway.
All right, Peter?
Something you all need to know is that Zack and I are a pair of Jamie Madrox scoops seeking our prime. And I swear when we say the same thing as each other, it has not been coordinated in advance. No money has changed hands. We're just the same psychological human being. I tweeted immediately after reading it, that was a solid B. And here's why I say that. So I think it was extremely reminiscent of his first issue of Avengers, not only in that it referenced Avengers, but in the kind of beats that it set up, the kind of hybrid technological and biological look at what evolution looks like. And I think that at this point, we all know that it's Hickman shtick. That's a Hickman comic book. And I think there was a lot of really fun, interesting things about it. I think there was a lot of really great art. I think the script was great. I hope you got the director's cut that have the script in the back, because the script was fascinating. But I do think there's things that are just not as interesting to me about Hickman doing that in 2019. That Avengers #1 came out 6 years ago, and his Fantastic Four started even several years before that. And I think that there's people who, in terms of bomb blast insanity level of first issue comic books, kind of have are the descendants of Hickman. If you read a Zdarsky first issue or a Cates first issue, that's post Hickman. And so I kind of can't help but say, I'm not saying it's bad, and there was amazing things about it, but I'm gonna need it to go a little bit further before I'm this was the best X-Men comic book of all time. But there's a lot of positive things, and I love where he's starting. I love that there's this idea of we're not gonna do X-Men karaoke, which he said at Comic-Con last weekend. He's looking to sing original songs of X-Men. He's not just looking to play the greatest hits, and that in itself is a really exciting thing to see in an X-Men comic book in a franchise that is so often over the past 9 years been a greatest hits franchise.
Right. So for me, it's a bit interesting. I don't know how to quite rate first issue of a comic book, especially a one issue, because to me it feels like there's just the first 5 minutes of a 3-hour long movie, then talking about that. So however, you gotta understand that I think yesterday after reading that, it all came rushing back to me why I love Hickman, or why I last year my life changed after reading Hickman's run. The idea of going big, solve everything, fix everything, and what's the other one? Everything dies. I think those ideas, it got instilled in me in such a way that it actually affected how I was driving so I'm an engineer, so part of my task is actually to improve productivity, and I was going by Hickman philosophy to drive that. So that's how much he means, his writing means to me, and it affects me. So when I read that first the very first page of that comic book is while humans of the planet Earth, while you slept, the world changed. And then you're oh, it's probably some other, some poet who wrote that. No, signed Professor X. I was just oh my God, I need to sit down. I need to sit down for this. And I was just blown away. And yeah, everything else that I read after that, I'm that's kind of cool. I don't know where this is going. But that first, it just grabbed me in a way that I'm like, I'm ready for this ride. I'm ready for this ride.
So, I mean, that's something really important about the way that he set it up is like, it has to actually be inviting to new people. You can, there's been a lot of great X-Men comics that are not inviting to new readers in the slightest.
Right. Zach, you were saying something, sorry.
I was wondering if you have a sense, you know, just based on your reading of this first issue, because you are coming basically new to the X-Men, if you got a sense of who these people are and where this story might be going, and what your thoughts are on both of those things.
So who these people are, like, to me, it's like, okay, the way I've been still looking at X-Men, and you know, I kind of talked, like, I think I talked with both of you like separately about this, is that one of my problem with X-Men has been is that they're all these super powerful beings, like, you know, every one of them. I am so glad now that I know what Omega level means, because that was a definition that I needed in my life, because that word was way too many times just in my face. I'm like, I don't know what that means, dude. Like, I don't know. So now it's defined. I'm so glad and happy for that. To me, it's like, okay, this Omega, like this super powerful being, they're out there and they're supposed to be representing marginalized people, right? Like that's what they are. And by the way, it's about to get very political. So if you don't like those shit, get out of here. Not you two. You two are tired.
Yeah, we're trapped. We
can leave if we wanted to.
Yeah, you can't. Just stay here. But talking about, I mean, I'm sorry, it's going to get political. To me, it's like, okay, great. They're supposed to be this marginalized people representation and all that. However, I feel like in every one of them, they're always the victim, and they're always crying about being the victim. They're always like downtrodden. They're always like running from bigger threats, which I guess like a lot of time the writers introduce because they just don't know what else to do with them, or they create some kind of forced conflict. I don't know what that is, but I'm just like, okay, just stop. Like, I don't know whether it was giving me anything, like anything more or anything like that. So from that point of view, I'm like, I read that, I'm like, oh shit, now they're just back to take their rightful place. They're like, we had enough. We're taking this back. You know, that's a feeling that I got. Whether it's going to play out that way, I don't know. You see? I don't know whether that answers your question, Zach.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I'm interested to hear also what you think on the same topics, Peter, as somebody who's obviously very expert in this. You know, I was thinking about that before because I knew that you responded so positively to this notion of like, yeah, mutants, stand up for yourselves, stop being victimized, you know, be somebody in the world. And I was thinking that
the way I say it is like, rise, my downtrodden pretties, rise. That's my motto.
Which is possibly what Xavier is saying when he's doing that little dance move at the beginning. That I like to think that that's actually the voiceover. He's saying, rise, my downtrodden pretties.
Rise. Anyway, sorry, Zach, sorry.
No, I was like, it occurs to me that if Hickman is going to take a Zag here, I feel like that is one area where it might easily be. Because the mouthpiece that we have for mutants taking a stand in the world mainly is Magneto here. So if there's any more unreliable narrator in the X-Men universe that he could have called in to be the spokesperson for mutants standing up for themselves, I can't think of him.
Sorry, you were cutting off a little bit. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was saying that Magneto is like the most unreliable possible narrator that Hickman could have brought in to be the mouthpiece for mutants finally taking a stand for themselves in the world. And you know what? I'm just not sure that this story is going to end up with as much of a positive spin on mutant rights and mutant self-confidence as it seems in this first issue.
Yeah. Peter, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think going with Zach says when Magneto says to the ambassadors, there's never been any mutant wars, and you're like looking at your bookshelf, I'm like, I don't know, I'm counting a lot of mutant wars, some of which have Magneto's name preceding the word war. So I do really think that something that's interesting about X-Men is that X-Men runs tend to be one of two things that, and this one presents as neither of those things. It tends to either be the downtrodden X-Men with their backs against the wall and feared and hated, or it tends to be, let's just pretend that the mutant metaphor isn't going to be a big deal and do superheroes, right? So you have, I don't want to say Morrison because that's its own separate topic. You have Whedon, who's like, we're going to be heroes at the beginning of his run. You have the run Gold that just concluded. Gold, we're going to be heroes. Red that just concluded, we're going to be heroes. But then you have runs that are really heavy with the mutant metaphor, like the Messiah Complex to the Second Coming run, very heavy with mutant metaphor, right? And so I think we've kind of been trained as readers to either expect a run that goes hated and feared, or we're big damn heroes. And I think that Hickman very wisely subverts that to say, yes, mutant metaphor, no hated and feared. Like, yeah, the ambassadors clearly hate and fear Magneto, but he's starting it from a position of strength, which is a place that we so rarely get to see an X-Men comic book begin. And I think when I hear Freya talk about what's so appealing about the comic book, to me, that's what I'm hearing, is that it's so rare to get to see the X-Men start from a position of strength. Maybe it's all going to get eroded. Maybe it's all going to fall apart over the course of 12 issues. But even that will be extraordinarily different. And even if now we go to Morrison, Morrison positioned mutant culture as something real and vibrant and important, but he still started with killing 16 million of them. So I think Hickman's perspective of like, what if we actually start at the good part of the story for mutants and maybe there's a decline or something sinister happening, is in itself just a really different way to approach X-Men. And I've read just about all of the major X-Men relaunches that have ever happened, not every single side book the way that Zack has endeavored to. And I can't think of another one that starts quite like that.
Right. And to the point that where you're saying that the Magneto is probably the least expecting person to do this, I think that's a Hickman thing to do. Because remember back in his Avengers run, which I don't know if you have gone to that yet, in your great Marvel.
I haven't made it in my read through, but I have familiarity with it from pre-read through.
Right. So the thing is like the fact that, he settles Thor and I forget Hyperion as like the caretakers of the Zebra kids. They're the two least the least expecting people that you could think who could be like these father figures, and they become like kind of like a surrogate fathers to these Zebra kids, and he's taking care of them. They're taking care of them. I feel like this is kind of like because I'm like, oh, of course it's Magneto because it's Hickman. I was looking at it from that point of view. But then again, I had my heart eyes on my Hickman while I was reading it. I'm like, oh, of course. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think what I think about this is kind of like, oh, yeah, like shock factor. I was shocked. I was wowed. Like, that's where I was looking at it.
Well, I think the shock factor is important because I think in large part, Hickman is writing for people like you, not necessarily in that he's writing specifically for people who haven't read X-Men before, but in that he wants this to be a very clean divorce from what's come before in X-Men. And even, looking at all of the other big relaunches in X-Men history, I can't think of any that have separated themselves from past X-Men stories quite to the degree that this one does. Morrison maybe comes close. Morrison seems like a sharp departure from what had come right before, but even he was drawing very, very heavily from what everybody had seen in the movies for, 2 years prior to that. Whereas this really, by design, is trying to give us an issue that doesn't look like any other X-Men issues. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. I don't know what you guys think.
So talking about Morrison's X-Men, Morrison's Hickman, I'm just Morrison's X-Men. That is one X-Men book I've read. And that was one of the earlier comic book I've read. And I thought that I was like, I'm getting all of this. Okay, great. I mean, this is fantastic. This is great. As a new reader, knowing nothing about it, this is great. Then I'm like, wait, why is Professor X not here anymore? Are they having sex in their mind? Is this cheating? And then I kind of gotten into that, and then I could not care for those ugly mutants. You know how I feel about ugly people. I just went in a dead silent. Guys, you gotta have to I'm like, get them out of my fiction. I want to only see pretty people on my comics. God damn it. So I kind of got into that. So I didn't feel any theme over there. I didn't get it was all about just, oh, look at X-Men and look at the things that they can do. I didn't get any themes or any of that. So from that point of view, I don't know whether that was a very representative of X-Men or anything like that. I don't know. What did you guys felt at that time when it was coming out?
You know, I read Morrison way after the fact. Actually, when I started that big collection journey in 2010, I was like, the first thing I should read is Morrison X-Men because everybody talks about it, and it's from the years that I hadn't read. I had been keeping up with Whedon because it was everywhere. Like, I would go into Tower Records, and it would just be in the spinner rack, like right by the register, so that was easy. So I read Morrison, and I hated Morrison at the time because I liked elements of it, like Scott and Emma, which I support that, and I like that he like leaned into this idea of mutant culture, but I don't always like when like X-Men is about big sci-fi things, and I don't always love Morrison, so part of me was kind of like, what is the fuss about? Over the past 9 years, I've actually reread it a number of times and I've really softened on it, and I actually appreciate a lot more about it now. But I think it was kind of jarring to come back as an X-Men fan who had been like a Jim Lee era, Onslaught era X-Men fan and read that, and because it's just such a bomb blast. And if you hadn't just been reading what had happened, the terrible X-Men comics that had happened in 1998 to 2000, it's hard to appreciate just how warranted it was to have anybody do anything that was a shakeup. And I think right now that we're with Hickman in a really similar period, like there have been good X-Men comic books. Good X-Men comic books came out last month. But if we're talking about, on the whole, the direction of the franchise and the theme of the franchise, we're coming out of some dark, dark ages for good X-Men comic books in terms of the direction of the franchise. And so I think Hickman feels fresh in a similar way to how Morrison felt fresh probably to readers at the time.
What about you, Zach?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I think that there is a way to do a fresh start relaunch that grows organically out of comics that have come before. And I'm not convinced after this one issue that Hickman has done that. He certainly did not do that with Avengers. To some extent, he actually did do that with Fantastic Four, but that was pretty early in his career, so he may have had a little bit more editorial pressure to connect to prior writers. But with this, I don't think I got anything. There are maybe like 4 characters who have significant speaking roles in this issue, which is maybe a complaint in and of itself. But of the ones that we see, I'm not sure that there's anything distinctive about them that would have made me identify them as their X-Men characters if I didn't know it from the pictures on the page. Maybe Magneto. Maybe Magneto's voice is there enough that it's, you can see that this is that character. But otherwise, I feel like they're saying words to advance an interesting Hickman plot, but I don't think that those words are emerging from the characters and their histories. And I want to keep reading to see whether or not that remains true.
So I want to turn that around on Freya for a second. So reading Hickman, because Hickman gets this comment a lot about character voices. You are a huge Cap fan, and you've read a ton of Iron Man. Do you feel like Hickman wrote them on voice in his Avengers? Like, were they the authentic them?
So I haven't read a lot of Iron Man.
Just Cap?
Just okay. Cap, So because I detest that character of Iron Man. Every time I try to... Yeah.
Except for his fashion.
Whatever, don't care. But the thing is, what I really liked about it, though, because I felt like the Cap or Tony and the Cap, both of them are very like, this is what needed to happen to those characters. To me, I felt like after the end of Brubaker's Captain America, okay, he's all of this, he's great, that's great and stuff. But the fact that, and then Tony is just coming out from the whole Superhero Registration Act bullshit or whatever that was that we don't want to talk about. I feel like whatever Hickman did with them that needed to happen for them to move forward. Like they needed to be modernized. They needed to be made into something so that new readers can connect with them. And then he made them cool. He made them super cool. To that point, I also wanted to kind of bring into the segue of that. How much of that is a reaction to MCU? Because I felt like they brought in Hickman in order to introduce Avengers to this idea of sci-fi, space, all of that. So in order to prepare MCU for Infinity War and Endgame. And I'm feeling like whether something similar is happening with X-Men as well, because they just got the rights back. The only reason that the X-Men were in the shithole that they were in, because they just didn't have the rights, and Marvel just didn't feel like advertising them. I mean, which we all kind of know that. And I feel like now that they're getting out of it and they're just bringing Hickman back in to do the same treatment that X-Men, like, Avengers got back in 2013 or when he was starting to write. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, I felt similarly about some of the character voice stuff than Zach did. And I think especially with who talked really? Cuckoo's, Magneto, and Scott, and Cyclops. That was pretty much the speaking roles in the issue in terms of characters.
Right, and Cyclops gives one kind of, like, slightly militant, slightly petulant speach, and that's it.
That's what
I really want to talk about that scene too, because I have a lot of thoughts about that sequence. But I kind of agree with Freya. Like, I think we just got a lot of, like, I won't say fan service, but like a lot of, like, we got to see Cyclops be Cyclops. We got Jean leading a title. We got Age of X-Men to really dig into how people felt about things. Like, I think we got a lot of gifts in the last year in terms of X-Men's, like, having those conversations that fans are always demanding. And to me, I'm willing to, like, absolve Hickman a little bit from starting right on the voices of these characters, because I think Freya's right. Like, we need a little bit of a break and to be reminded what the, like, best, most effective versions of these characters are. And with Magneto, who had just been through everything in his Colin Bunn title, and then everything in X-Men Blue, and then where Chris Claremont left him after the one shot with X-Men Black, like, I kind of like that we're starting with, like, a very fresh version of Magneto, and I didn't have to go back and recheck those. I think that's what we deserve as readers. And so I'm kind of like between the two of you. I agree that I'm a little bit worried that Hickman might not be able to write everybody on voice the way that I might want them to be, but I also acknowledge that Hickman tends to have a pretty good sense of where he needs to turn and reposition characters, and he was very successful, as Fangirl points out, doing that on Avengers. Sorry, I feel like I'm totally equivocating, and I always hate equivocators, but I really, because then I feel like I have to do the monologue.
No, I love Hamlet. People who equivocate with me. I love them because they're talking, like, whatever. But sorry, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I have sort of like a literary philosophical theory on this. Which is
this is why we're all here.
There are for my literary philosophical theories. That's why people tune in.
I just referenced Shakespeare, so I opened the door way up.
Oh God, you guys read Shakespeare. What am I? I need new friends.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna play the Beatles at the end of this too. And my soup is almost ready. I think that there are really two different ways that we can say that a writer is not on voice for characters. One of them is the sort of Brian Michael Bendis way of, oh, he just writes the same speech pattern for everybody, or he doesn't understand how this character talks, or it just doesn't sound like that character. And you can do that, and you can have that flaw as a writer because you're just not good with dialogue, but the things the character is doing are still true to the character, and more importantly, the stories are emerging organically out of who that character is. What strikes me about Hickman, what has always struck me about Hickman, is as much as he is absolutely this intricate, oftentimes brilliant master planner for his storylines, those stories precede the characters. He is plugging characters who work into the stories that he's created. Oftentimes they're the right characters. Sometimes he's thinking hard about, like, which character can I plug into this in a way that will make sense? But the story is coming first. He's not saying who are the characters that I'm working with and how can I grow something out of who they are and what they've been through and what they want. I don't see any indication in this issue at all that he is starting from the premise of who are Magneto and Cyclops, what do they want in the world, and what X-Men story can I grow out of that?
So to that point, my counterpoint to that is, I feel like if there is, among the big two, if there is one company's character you can do this with, is actually Marvel. Because, my God, they've been around for 80 years, and they have character for 80 years. Now, plug them up, put them in stories, and let that story run. Cannot do that with DC characters.
Yes, doesn't work. Or DC would label it as, like, an alternate reality. They would
would be doing it as an alternate reality because, and this is something that I have, like, so much problem with DC Rebirth or DC New 52, because you're saying that these are reboot, which means these are fresh new characters, and you have given me nothing to tell me why this character stands up. You expect me to know the previous version, to know that these characters are out. You see what I'm saying? So there's like a subtlety about that, because I think like that's why like Hickman works in Marvel so well, because he would just, these characters, they can be establishing themselves somewhere else. Go do that somewhere else. Do that, like, Remender's Captain America, which was running concurrently, like, the Thor by Jason Aaron, all of those, like, when he was doing Avengers, that's what's happening. Like, go develop yourself over there. I'm going to pick the character. Like, it's a video game to him. Like, it's like, I'm going to pick the character, drop them here, and then run the story. Like you were saying, that he really knows to pick the right characters, but are they doing things characteristically? To me, yeah, they are. They needed it. I needed to see Captain America leading a war in space rather than at home. Like, I needed that to see that, and he does that. So to that point, I think that's what he does. I mean, if you know what I mean, that's what I feel.
So I want to dig into that Cyclops scene in specific, because I think it seems like the most kind of basic scene, like, oh, Hickman wrote some Fantastic Four, because of course he did. But right, we all love it. But there's some interesting stuff happening in that scene. So here, let me just throw a few things out there and see what you have to say. So why are they breaking into Damage Control to steal what? Especially with the interstitial page that we got saying that Damage Control has all of this decommissioned Reed Richards and Tony Stark technology, which I think is very clever. Why does Mystique have access to the portal? Does that mean she gets to go back to Krakoa? Or does that mean just all mutants have access to the portals and you can't stop them because the portals let mutants through? Is the Cyclops that comes back through the portal Cyclops or Mystique? Does that Cyclops have two functional optic blasting eyes, because he didn't the last time we saw him a week ago? And ultimately, was Cyclops, if it was Cyclops, was he already affiliated with them before they did the thing, or was he just really coming to pick up Sabretooth because they're trying to scoop everybody back in? So I think there's, and then on top of all of that, the whole very, very heavy implication about Franklin Richards is going to come home to his mutant family, or eventually friends, which I think was maybe the most interesting thing in the whole issue. So I really want to hear the person who's read everything dig into that, and I want to hear the person who has not ever read anything dig into that, because I'm obsessed with that scene.
Zach, you go first.
Well, the Franklin Richards foreshadowing, for like this longtime reader especially, might be the most quietly exciting part of the entire issue. If that really is going to become a huge part of this run, then this run instantly justifies its existence in the universe. And, to have him come up not only very portentously in the dialogue of that scene, but then in Hickman's, famous charts, which show up on the next page, to have Franklin's name highlighted in red with his affiliation unknown.
Human affiliation, human.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't.
That's right. Human. That's right. He is on the enemies list right now.
Right. He was even that. Yeah. Go for it. Sorry.
Well, this is, if we can finally get payoff, because this is, I don't know if Fangirl, if you go back far enough with Marvel to be aware that the Franklin Richards foreshadowing with mutant kind is something that goes way, way back deep into the 80s, starting in Louise Simonson's X Factor, with Franklin initially set up as quite possibly the salvation character for all of mutant kind, and probably the most powerful mutant who has ever existed on the planet Earth.
And actually first teased by Claremont in Days of Future Past, right? Because Franklin is Rachel Summers' partner in the dystopian future. And
that's right. They never actually call him Franklin Richards, but we obviously, readers at that point knew that Franklin Richards was a mutant, and they call this character Franklin. So you could have easily figured out what was going on here. So yes, you're right.
So he's from we're talking 1980. This plot has a long-standing pedigree.
And it just never got paid off. It gradually petered out throughout the 80s and 90s, and then eventually just sort of fizzled away, and people stopped really bringing up Franklin in the context of X-Men stories. And he seems to be coming back here with a vengeance for some purpose. And I don't know what this purpose yet is going to be.
So when I read that line, my first thing was, Franklin is a mutant? Then I was like, wait, what? you guys, I mean, I read Hickman's Fantastic Four, and in that one, Franklin could do some weird ass shit. Like, he was like going back and forth in time. He was doing all kinds of things. And then Franklin also shows up in Avengers when the Cap's time traveling run, the kind of time traveling story that like Peter loves. Peter loves that run.
Oh yeah. Anything with time travel that has no meaning is my jam.
Like, Peter loves that.
Which Hickman has solemnly promised us will not be the key to this X-Men run. Whatever he's going to be doing here, whatever is going on in the seemingly dystopic reality of Powers of 10, which we haven't seen yet, he tells us it's not going to be time traveling or an alternate future. So we will see how true that is.
And he also said that I've been lying to you for months. So
That's right.
really don't know.
So I want to give Zack a candy every time he says Powers of 10, because that's the correct way of saying it.
Because he's a brand ambassador.
My goodness. Like,
you will notice a very subtle but very discernible pause before I say it every time, because I have to check with myself to make sure that I'm getting that right. Because I always almost say House of 10 like it's some 1990s MTV reality show, and that would not be correct.
So, yeah, because I keep on saying Power of X. No, it's Power of 10, So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so first of all, I had no idea that Franklin Richards is actually a mutant. So that tells you how much that idea has been just shoved under the rug or never gets brought up.
Yes.
It also maybe tells you how nebulous the concept of what a mutant is in the Marvel Universe. And if I were to throw out another speculation about this Hickman run, I don't think he is going to let that rest. The fact that Hickman is the kind of writer for whom he could not let the term Omega-level mutant remain undefined, I can't imagine that he is just going to sit there unconcerned with the way that mutants are distinguished in the Marvel Universe from everybody else who has powers. That's been a running joke about X-Men almost since the X-Men were invented. And I just can't see Hickman walking away from this run without redefining that somehow or rationalizing it somehow.
I mean, we talked about it as well before. I'm like, how is it that general public, what we know about our world, how people misrepresent, the misconception that runs rampant so often, how is it that Spider-Man is not being killed for being mutant? Because people will be like, yeah, this motherfucker has power. He's a mutant. He's not. It's an achieved thing. It's not a born thing. But anyway, so the thing is, I was saying that, I didn't know about him being mutant either because Marvel doesn't push it. The other aspect of it, Faria doesn't pay attention to shit. So I just want to put that out there. I mean, it's very possible in Hickman's Fantastic Four, he talked about it. I didn't pay attention. So just putting it out there. But the thing is, the whole thing gave me so much chills. I got 3 chills. First with the whole Professor X declaration thing. The second was when this whole thing happened that Franklin will come to his right family, because the whole aspect of Fantastic Four is family and how 6 of them together. The idea of that they're going to be broken, and then like, what's her name? Oh my God, how am I forgetting her name? Invisible Woman. What's her name?
Sue Storm.
Like Sue, kind of like the way her face is, like she's kind of like dreading this all this time, and it's finally come to settle in for her. That gave me this shiver, and then the last shiver was Magneto say, "You all have new gods." I mean, I was like.
Can you see that on my screen right now? I'm trying to share the panel. I don't know if I'm doing it correctly. Can you see
I cannot see it.
You can't see comments. All right, I'm working on it.
Yeah, so the thing, I think like something about like a share screen you can do.
Yeah, well, if you start seeing a comic book on my screen, let me know, because that means I've succeeded.
Right, so the thing is like the fact that he said that I'm like, okay, you know what, Pornhub, you can just close yourself. I don't need you anymore. I just need this will do. This will do. Sorry for the gruff, images,
here
guys,
we go.
But I have to add it to the stream. There you go.
There we are.
The technology. So here's the page. This, did you honestly think we're gonna sit around forever and take it? And she's kind of like, well, please greet your son for me. It's just such a moment, and that's not even the whole conversation about Franklin,
right?
But
Yeah, but
see, this is really that scene was really interesting to me because, you know, one of the very clear things about this issue is that there is a lot of religious symbolism going on. You know, beginning with that cold open of Professor X under this extremely Book of Genesis looking tree, greeting the first man and woman and calling together his X-Men, and then ending with Magneto in Jerusalem, dressed in white, plucking a flower off of a tree.
Sunburst behind him.
Right.
And, like,
declaring mutants the new gods. And right in the middle of this, like almost midway through the issue, we have Cyclops saying that when Franklin is ready to come join his real family, they'll be ready for him. And, you know, there is a sort of New Testament through line, and I say this as, you know, the Jewish guy on the podcast. There is a New Testament through line of this new religion existing to turn sons against their fathers, to bring not peace but a sword, and to redefine family groupings in such a way that Franklin no longer belongs to his birth parents. He belongs to his real family, his real kinsmen, mutant kind, in the X-Men. And clearly this is not accidental, and clearly this is something that's going to be a key theme to this run.
Yeah, this is to me, like, we can say, oh, it's a solid B, but that does not mean we're not excited. And I think that, like, we've been through some of the, like, kind of talking about the things that we haven't been excited by, but this themes, and the theme of using Cyclops to do it, who always refers to himself as Xavier's son, who's been a prodigal son since 2012 because he, spoilers, killed Charles Xavier in Avengers vs. X-Men, and to have them both be back to life quite suddenly over the last year of comic books, and to set up this scene where now he's coming to collect on the Fantastic Four, and like, we haven't seen Cyclops and Xavier team up for a long time. Even before AVX, Cyclops was leading Utopia, and they kind of put Xavier out to pasture in the original Sin crossover, not the event, but the crossover between Wolverine Origins and X-Men Legacy, where Cyclops and Emma are like, we're in charge now. And if you go even farther back to Deadly Genesis and to Rise and Fall, Cyclops was like, I'll hold down the fort on the planet, you, Professor Xavier, go after my brother in space. So it's been a really long time, possibly since Morrison's X-Men, that we've seen Cyclops and Xavier conspiring on the same side. And even if it's a red herring and it's pod person Cyclops or whatever, I just think that there's something so thematically rich, and to compare, also add to that with Magneto in the embassy in Jerusalem giving the speech that he did, it's just genius. Like, nobody else is working with X-Men at this level.
I totally agree. And for all of the critiques that I make of Hickman and this issue, this is really where he excels. This constructing of very, very intricate themes that he's going to see through a run, this is what makes him great when he is great. And there is so much meat to chew on as far as those themes are concerned here. You know, this sort of religious family aspect is one. The other one, of course, is this, you know, this very strange, very unsettling idea of these flowers of Krakoa. Whatever these are, wherever these are coming from, whatever these are doing, this is weird. And it is, you know, it's creepy in a way that lingers with you.
Right. And the thing is, like, Hickman himself said that you human love your symbolism, so I'm going to give you some. So he does say that, you know, Magneto says that, but I took that from as like Hickman saying that. And, you know, there was like so many of that, like, especially when this is Jerusalem, I'm like, of course it's Jerusalem. Where else? My goodness. Like, you know, Magneto, especially having Magneto, the Holocaust survivor there, and doing all of that and saying that you have new gods. God, like I said, Pornhub can shut themselves down. I don't need them anymore. But two things before we wrap up quickly. The nation of Krakoa, is this a new thing?
So the island of Krakoa goes all the way back to the first big relaunch of X-Men, which was Giant Size X-Men #1 in 1975. And this was in the context of the big surprise twist midway through that issue. This was an island which turned out to be a mutant. It was an island that was actually alive and had kidnapped the original team of X-Men, and the new team of X-Men that had been assembled had to go and rescue them.
Okay.
Krakoa has shown up few times since then. It's been brought back either in the present or in retcons in the past. Probably most memorably in Deadly Genesis, where we found out that there had been a whole other team of new X-Men assembled who had died on Krakoa prior to the assemblage of the team in Giant Size X-Men #1. But Krakoa is clearly being used in a new way here. So how much it's going to connect to those past appearances, I don't really know yet. The flowers of Krakoa are definitely new.
Okay. And the second thing is, why does Professor X-Men looks like the Maker?
Because Hickman loves his guys with big round heads. Like, what is it? It's such an interesting art direction. Now, it's directly drawn from Grant Morrison. If you go into the first Grant Morrison issue, he's got this style of Cerebro with the big X on the forehead on. So I think that he's deliberately making a nod, but it's also hard to ignore the fact that it looks like a Maker and one of his characters in East of West too. So it's kind of like a little bit of it's like almost like a Hickman self-reference.
Well, and there's something going on here that we don't see his eyes at all. And when we first see him, he's greeting this first male mutant who maybe is Cyclops, maybe not. We don't know.
Vulcan.
Or maybe Vulcan. He's got some blasts coming out of his eyes. You know, something is going on with eyes here, and the fact that we can't see Xavier's eyes. I have no idea what it is. This is one of those Hickman things where it might not be until the last page of the last issue of this run that I have any idea what he's actually doing here. But this is something. He's doing something.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Hickman is famous for these opening sequence things which seem non sequitur at the time and later have a lot of meaning. Like Sophia was in from the beginning, but if those first 2 pages, they're weird. Where is Xavier? Why is there that giant tree thing? Who's hatching out of the pods? Clearly, they're meant to be implied as mutants because we see the little blast of red coming out of the guy's eyes. And if you got the digital version with the script, the description of that character is all redacted. So, like, even if Hickman was doing that to mess with us, like, why would he redact the fact that the character has red coming out of their eyes unless there's some other aspect? So I love the levels of meta. Like, Hickman is messing with us in the issue, he's messing with us on Twitter, and he's messing with us purely by what he decided to have them redact in the script that goes with the issue. Like, it's like an alternate reality game. Like, and then he's messing with us because there's typos in the cipher code that you have to go on Twitter to find out that he's admitting were typos. So Hickman,
maybe they're not typos. Maybe it's supposed to be a hate way. A hate way could be a thing. I don't know.
I'm just loving that you experts and you aficionado are just in a brand new territory, and you're like, I don't know what we're gonna do, you guys.
So, like, for real, what did you think? What do you love foreboding dancing Xavier? I cannot get over his little Xavier dance. What did you think was happening in that opening scene? It's weird. I think people have been distracted by it, by how the rest of the issue played out in Magneto's monologue, but it's freaking weird.
Right, and the thing is, to me, I was like, please, let's have X-Nihilo show up as well in dance sequence. I love that guy, like, from his Avengers run. But at the same time, it was very reminiscent of that as well. That they're creating this garden. He's kind of always have this like whole garden thing going on. But then I kind of like, I need to come back to this because I thought that this was, like you guys said, it's like a teaser, is something that's being set up. I'm not sure that I have enough information to kind of be more, like, talk more about this, because this is something that I'm just kind of putting at the back of my head. Like, I need to know more about this, if you know what I mean. But for a while, I thought, like, is this the Maker? Has he taken over the X-Mutants? This is his, his last ditch attempt, because he's still hanging around in 616. Like, I don't know. So yeah, to me, it was like a lot of all of that. So one thing I do want to mention, Vic, we talked about the story and what's coming up and everything so much. The art. Can we talk about the art? What do we think about the art? We have no thoughts about the art.
I think the art, my feeling is that the art does a solid job of conveying the plot. I think that there are, if we can trust the script that we have in the back, there are certain aspects of the script that I'm not sure get carried through with all of the subtlety and nuance that Hickman is putting into his descriptions. But the storytelling is more or less clear. It doesn't distract from what Hickman is trying to do. I think it, I'm not blown away by the art, but I think it does its job effectively.
I surprisingly tend to agree with Zach. I think that Pepe Larraz is one of the best artists at Marvel right now, but he draws in a very Marvel House style that is very influenced by Stuart Immonen, and he is the first to say that. And so I think we got a beautiful, perfectly executed Marvel House style looking comic book. It's different than thinking about past Hickman launches that have maybe been a little bit more idiosyncratic in terms of art style. And also I do think that Zach's point is critical, that I think some nuance and detail from the script got lost. And for me, it got a little bit lost in the colors. I get a little frustrated with Marty Gracia's colors sometimes. He puts a lot of reflections on everything, hair, eyeballs, sun rays in front of the characters, and I get that that's part of the colorist's job, is to find the light source and the reflection. But if you look at the inked pages in the back, Larraz had kind of already set a lot of that out, and there's a couple of times, especially with how Hickman describes the building in Jerusalem and where the overgrowth is and how abrupt it cuts off before the other building, that I had to go to the black and white page to like really get what Hickman was talking about versus the colored page. But this is the first issue of a team up between these artists, and I think, again, just because I have a couple of critiques of it, it's still like high wire act, amazing collaboration, the likes of which we're not seeing a lot of, even though Marvel has some really spectacular art going on right now. Larraz is at the top of the top in that house style category.
Right. So to me, like, I met Pepe Larraz in C2E2, a fantastic person to meet.
That's so cool to hear.
He was like, because I was kind of hanging around to try to get a sketch from him, but he ran out of page. So what I did, I wish I had it with me. It's there. I took his, where it says like the con, the Pepe Larraz, his name. So I took the signboard. I'm like, why don't you just draw on the back of this? Because you're not going to be using it. You're leaving. And he's like, yeah, if you don't mind. So he drew it over there. And he was drawing it, he was like, I always very appreciative when female fans are female readers are out there, they're reading comics, they're coming and talking to me, because, it just is very important for me to see that those stories are reaching everyone. I was like, I love you now. So, so he bought my loyalty of that. My loyalty is like, you can buy it with like a little bit of praise and stuff like that. But the thing is, like, I thought that I completely agree with that. It's being like very house style kind of thing. But I thought it was very vivid, and it's, it gets the job done. I would like to see to see how it kind of continues over the like going forward. One thing I want to say though, Peter always ruins art for me, because he introduces new things I need to worry about, and this time around
she cares about lettering, and she cares
I never cared about lettering and stuff. Then he pointed it out. Now that's all I care about, lettering. Then then he talked about, today he's talked about reflection. That's all I'm gonna see from now on, reflections. And then I'm like, stop with this reflections.
Well, Peter pointed out to me a while ago that Gracia's colors tend to put very strange gradients in people's hair for reasons that aren't always explicable based on the lighting source in the actual panel, and now I cannot stop seeing it. Like the strange little color changes and stripes in people's hair. I just focus in on it in every panel now.
You want to see, it's not like magic eye, it's really easy to see to anybody watching. If you look at a panel of hair, he usually takes a slice of the hair and he puts a different colored reflection on it, which in reality is a thing. I'm trying to like point my ring light at my head. Is a thing that kind of does happen, but then when you see the pencils, it's never in the pencils, and it's just like really kind of, sometimes it works, but he did it a lot in his run with Immonen on Bendis's All New X-Men, and by the end of it, it's all I could see in any panel of Jean Grey was the reflection on her hair. Like I couldn't even see if he had drawn her face, because that's all I could look at. But
I'll stop looking at these things and stop ruining these things for us. Because now I'm going to be only looking at reflections.
Look, here's the point I want to make again, because I think Zach and I can sound like we're negative Nellies a little bit. This is a conscious choice to make this House of X in Marvel style. They could have picked somebody way more far out. They have people on their roster right now that can push the boundaries of what the art looks like a little bit more. It's a conscious choice to give somebody who gives familiar Marvel house style and familiar X-Men style, because it's so close to Eminem and we saw him with Bendis for so long. Next week we are going to get a very different feeling on Powers of X, because it's much more it's much more angled. It's gonna, and it's all deliberate. Like Hickman does not do the stuff,
and the colors are very much in contrast to this too.
Yes.
So whatever critique we want to offer about the coloring choices here, that again is a strategic decision.
Yeah, and Lara's and Gracia too. These are some of the highest high wire act professionals in comics right now, and I think that you can't have any of these critiques without the acknowledgement that it's probably deliberate.
So Powers of 10 is drawn by someone else?
Who is it? It's it's the other really great one. It's drawn by somebody else. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Peter, can you share the screen again with you? I just want to go to
certainly can.
Yeah, I just want to go to the last page because we should be wrapping this up. I mean,
Okay.
we thought that we were going to talk about only like 5 minutes of this. My God, that's like, it's us. Can you go to the very last page where it shows you what's coming up?
By the way, RB Silva, I want to give credit where it's due. RB Silva is doing the artwork for Powers of 10.
Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
Okay, so reading order. That's where I want to
Okay.
say something.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm getting
One-
there.
one of these days,
Oh, no,
one of these days we're gonna get there.
Comixology is very responsive to my clicks.
Okay, all right. So this is like what's coming up. So the next one is Powers of 10 1, then House of X 2. Why are those things in red? What does that mean?
So there's a couple thoughts on that. One is that if you go through the other charts in the issue, that the things in red, sometimes they're the human things or sometimes they're the things that have conflict, especially if you go back to the page that has Franklin Richards affiliated with the humans. But also Jordan White, who's the X-Men line editor, has been asked what his favorite 3 moments are of this sequence of books. And these red lines all reflect his favorite moments. And if you read the previews book last week, every artist associated with this said the biggest shocker is in House of X 2.
Ooh, which is coming up in 2 weeks' time. So next week, it's going to be Powers of 10, number 1. And we're going to see if the 3 of us can get together again and talk about this, because nothing gave me more joy than reading that House of X first, issue number 1, and then coming here today to talk to both of you. I am so happy that, that we're sharing this new era of X-Men with X-Noob, Expert, and X-Aficionado.
X-Aficionado. And yeah, let me just say that deconstructing this issue with you two has been easily the most fun of my July. So thank you both for doing this. This has been fantastic.
Right. Thank you so much for joining me. And Peter, thank you so much. You were hesitant when Hickman was first announced, but look at you, all excited now.
Well, Hickman has his bullshit that he likes to do, and I remain a little bit skeptical about what the journey we're going to get put through over these next 11 issues. But we didn't even get to talk about the 6 amazing series and the diverse creator lineup that's going to come with that comes after this. So maybe next week we can dig a little bit into that. I think we're seeing one of the most thrilling things happening for X-Men right now, and it's not just about Jonathan Hickman. And so that's what really excites me. I just want to see comics be great. That's like my number 1 wish.
You know what? That's our wish too.
Here.
And then everybody's faves are terrible, and then you have to show up and tell them about it. If only they would be great.
Right. I mean, that's we try to be positive about things. So I don't know, Zach. Do you think issue number 1 requires a judgment right now? Because I feel like it's too.
I don't think it's possible to give a thumbs up, thumbs down on the first issue of really any modern comic, certainly not a Hickman comic. I will say this, I am definitely interested to keep reading. And given where the X-Men franchise has been for a lot of the last 5 years, that's a win right there.
Right. I mean, I completely agree. And, so let's see how Powers of 10 shakes out next week. So we will do our best to come here and do that, and then get our opinion on this. And thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of the awesome work that Peter's doing, the link to his channel is below, crushingkrisis.com.
Yeah, Krisis with a K.
Krisis with a K, because I get the brand going. Of course, like, if you also want to see the how Peter got me obsessed with Hickman, that video will be linked as well, so you can go and see that our very first video of that.
Oh, there's hours of Freya talking about Captain America. Get ready.
It's worth it. People watch it. It's worth it.
Thank you. I mean, that's what I kind of learned, like my love for things. All right, well, tune in next week, and thank you for watching. And we're all very hopeful about Powers of 10. So
bye, everyone.
Bye.